Hey everyone, this is Devin Crabtree. This is my Module 9 case study final. Here we go. So Section 1 is just the summary. In this case, we've got a first-year principal and Principal Richard that's been just put in a pretty tough situation. He's got a student who is a tougher student, had some behavior issues in the past, but he's been developing a good relationship with him, thinks things are going well. And then he's got another student who he doesn't seem to know as well, doesn't say, but I would assume that he hadn't been building a relationship with this kid as much because he's an honor student and just a really good student. There's a teacher that sees these two have some sort of exchange in the hallway, and the teacher reports it to Principal Richard. The teacher's a little suspicious about the exchange and thought maybe it's a drug deal or something. Richard decides to call both students into the office at the same time, which he will later regret after doing this, but that's kind of where the big issue comes in. And I don't know that a lot would have changed, but it definitely would have made a difference for one of the students. So the students say they're actually not making a drug deal, but instead that David's just holding something for James. There's a cop in the office with them. The cop searches the students, and on David he finds some brass knuckles. Obviously, brass knuckles are a felony offense and prohibited at their school. So the cop immediately puts the two students in handcuffs. James, who is the tougher student that's had some behaviors in the past, says that he made David hold the brass knuckles by threatening him to like beat him up or whatever. And Principal Richard thought the cops would just take the cuffs off of David, the honor student, at that point, but they didn't. Both boys would end up being charged with felony possession of a prohibited weapon and expelled for no less than 45 days. That's what the school's policy would have them do. Once it was time for Principal Richard to fill out the paperwork for the situation, he did for James without hesitation because he knew the school policy, and James admitted what he did in the situation. But after writing David's name down, he ripped up the form and threw it away. He did what he thought was an ethical decision, the right decision. 1 week later, after David is back in school and James is obviously expelled, the director of secondary education called Richard and told him he needed to follow through with the paperwork on David or that he would be reprimanded. Richard said he would not be able to comply because of the situation. So that's basically it. It's obviously a really tough spot to be in. I think Richard makes the right decision, doing what you got to do, what's best for your students, and not necessarily for you, even though it might not work out great for you in the end. Section 2. So there's two people harmed in this case, in my opinion, and that's Principal Richard and David. David's most likely going to have what used to be a flawless reputation might have a little bit different reputation for him going forward if people just are judging and don't know the situation. So that's a tough part. And then Principal Richard will obviously be reprimanded for his decision, even though he felt like he did the right thing, at least from what we know. The only legal issue I see is Principal Richard just not following through on the paperwork for David, which is a breach of contract. I don't think. I mean, a reprimand can mean a few different things, I guess, but that's the only thing I could think of, other than obviously the kids having a weapon at school. But that's also where the ethical issue comes in. There are policies in place in the school district and a police department that are to be followed, even though sometimes it can be a tough decision to make. Richard decides not to do that because he does not feel it's right to charge David and expel him. And again, I think that's the right decision. But the choice also comes with consequences, and he will be reprimanded. The justice system is not always fair, and it has areas that tough decisions are required, and that's the same goes with school board policies. There's just some tough situations you're going to be in. It's my opinion that another ethical issue for David is that something that he could have done is gone to his resource officer administration right when James began threatening or asking him to take the brass knuckles. I know he's probably nervous and scared because he's threatening him, but it's still, if you do have a police officer, which most schools do have a police officer on campus, that could have been a good option for him. That was another thing that would have made sense to me. Obviously, not being there, not knowing the kids, but section three. So in this, just synthesizing what's going on in this case, a principal is faced with a very challenging decision in which he either makes what he believes is an ethical decision for his students, or does what keeps him from being reprimanded. So Principal Richard can either think about his students first or think about himself first. It's what makes it really difficult is if you do get fired for the situation, if you've got a family at home, this can be really tough. So I totally get it. All right, and then in section four, the first part of section four, the people. Principal Richard is a man who's just trying to make a difference with his students at his school, and what I would consider a soft spot for the kids from the South Side, which I assume is a tougher neighborhood from reading this case. He understands that these students have a tough situation at home or in their lives away from school, wherever that might be. And Richard's also from that area, so he knows what life can be like there. James is a student at the school from the South Side who has had a troubled past. Him and Principal Richard have developed a better relationship recently. James makes a bad decision to get another student involved in one of his own problems. He does try to get the student out of trouble after they get caught, and Principal Richard was pretty proud of that, even though it didn't matter. And then there's David, who's a student at the school who most would consider an exemplary student. He's an honor student and a standout trombonist. David has never students in any kind of trouble, and he's put in a very difficult situation by James, and he suffers because of it. All right, the place. The school seems to be in an urban community with South Side being used as a demographic. The area that the school is located in is most likely has a higher crime rate than average because it's a large school, and normally when we hear South Side, North Side, East Side, West Side of town, it's big, and one of those is usually a tougher area with a higher crime rate. The school has said, I said they had 900 students, so that tells me it's just most likely large. That's a pretty big middle school. All right, program. So based on this case study, it's a junior high school with 900 students. The school would be a public institution, and just by the sheer number of students, there would have to be some bilingual students there. Now that's just an assumption. They don't actually talk a lot about the school itself in this case. All right, section 5. So I believe that the decision could be damaging to both stakeholders and the community. It's obvious the district believes in their policy and abides by them and tries to force them, which is the right way to do it. But this decision to attempt to expel David, who has no prior records or anything and is an honor student at your school, could come back to haunt them if they did decide to follow through with that. You'll have parents angry, but just the community in general, if they heard about it, would probably be pretty upset. Then it could also be damaging in a way where they could have a very good assistant principal be reprimanded in Principal Richard. And if that happens, if he's fired, obviously he would be gone. And then if he decides to leave because of the situation, what seems like they would be losing a pretty good assistant principal. And there could be backlash from the community and stakeholders based on that decision. He made what he thought was the right decision, and even though it did go against the school board's policy. And I have on here, a principal who makes decisions for his students is a principal you want in your district. All right, section 6. So I do think Principal Richard has options. Each comes with its own different issues. Option 1 is Richard continues with his decision not to turn in the paperwork for David. And then this option is a problem because he'll get reprimanded, which we already know. Option 2, Richard could change his mind and follow district protocol and fill out the paperwork for David. This is an issue because he doesn't feel like that's the right thing to do for his student. And the consequence would be that families and community become, upset about this, and he might lose respect as a leader. And I know in the case, he talks to David's mom, and clearly she's pretty distraught and upset about the situation. And then option three, Richard could continue with his decision to not turn the paperwork in for David. And right after that decision, he will be reprimanded. Obviously, we know that. So he could start preparing to call for a council or a hearing or some sort with their board office and explain everything. And I don't know how like a lot of districts do that, but I know when there's a situation in our district that you have an option to have a hearing, especially if you're getting fired. Section 7, this is just evaluating our options. The pros of option 1 is he's just doing the right thing. It's students first, and he'll have Principal Richard have the community back. And the cons is he gets reprimanded, and it's just he's not going with he's going against board policy. Option 2, he won't get reprimanded. The pros are he will have no reprimand, and he'll get the board's approval for following the protocol. And the cons are it's not a student's first decision, and he's not doing what he feels is right. And I would consider this decision to be non-ethical. And then option 3 is similar to the top one. He's striving to do the right thing. Students first, he'll get the community backing, and this time he'll be prepared and get a chance to explain the situation. The cons are he will be reprimanded at least at first, and it'll be against board policy. This option, obviously, you're hoping that as you go through and explain the situation, the reprimand will be pulled and everything will be okay. Section 8, clearly the best option, in my opinion, is option 3. I just think it's a simple answer that you just take a student's first approach. What's best for David, not for anybody else. And I just think as a school leader, it's your job to do what's best for your students and make ethical decisions. These circumstances are difficult, but the decision's for the better. And you just hope that once you go through with this, you get the chance to explain everything, and your board members all understand, and your administrators understand. And I think that those people will, stakeholders will understand, and they'll listen. The policy will not be compromised. It will be improved. You would try to talk to them about that, maybe changing, even if they decide not to reprimand you, or if they continue to. I still think after the situation, if you are still in the district, you try to talk to them about that policy, just because it just doesn't seem fair, and that's just the way it is. All right, Section 9. So if I were Richard, I would not expel David and begin the process of calling to the board for a hearing on the situation if you're still reprimanded, which it sounds like he would. This decision is made because it's the right decision. We've learned about moral compass, ethics, standards, all of these different things in this class and just every day in our lives and at work. If we don't stand up for right, then are we actually even doing our jobs? I don't believe so. I do believe that the board would realize this is the right decision and Richard would not be reprimanded. All administrators involved and board members involved would need to know the case and understand what has happened. And then it would be a good idea, I think, to let them know that school policy needs to be looked at closely, and that certain decisions could lead to losing a principal that really cares about his students. And then a plan B would be to accept the reprimand on the record and hope that Richard is not terminated, and then to ask the board to look at the policy again and consider making some changes. And then, with that, if Richard was reprimanded, he could start looking for another job and just find a new school board with maybe a different policy in place that he felt was more appropriate for situations like this and what might be a tougher community. All right, so my reflection, I thought this assignment was just really helpful, just giving me ideas on understanding what decisions mean and how they impact everybody and so many different people in different ways. And I think it's important for a school leader to know what's important to them and to make those decisions based off that. Like going into a leadership position, you've got to know what's important to you before you go into that, because when challenging situations come up and you aren't sure, you may not make the right decision. This case just makes me believe more that I would fight for my students first, and I think the hardest part is just if it is a situation where you might get fired or let go, you do have to keep your family in mind. But again, if you have your morals in place and understand what you believe in before a situation like this comes, I believe that the person would make a right decision. Thank you. Enjoyed this class, guys. Enjoyed reading all your stuff. We'll see you around. Good luck.